Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria and for today's video I thought I would test the waters of horror. So for those who do not know, I don't read an awful lot of horror. I don't know if you can kind of gauge from behind me, but I read a lot of romantic fantasy, romantasy if you will, and romance. Those are my two favorite genres. I do delve into other things from time to time. I read historical, I read literary fiction, I read romance, I read fantasy, I read sci-fi, I read classics. I do not read a lot of thriller, mystery, crime, or horror. Those genres, for whatever reason, have been outcast. I do not seem to engage with them anywhere near as much as the other genres, which is a bit sad. So I've decided, let's delve into horror. I've read a couple of horror things in my time, not many. A couple of years ago, I actually read The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, and I ended up really enjoying this. I know a lot of people don't like this, but also a lot of people must like it because it was in the Goodreads Choice Awards that year. I really enjoyed this, and so I'm curious to see what else the genre has to offer. For context, I don't even watch a lot of horror movies. To be honest, I don't enjoy being scared. I don't like watching a movie that's gonna make me jump or cry because I've gotten a fright or something, which does happen when I watch horror movies. I'm fascinated by horror films. I think the actual stories, and particularly ones that have interesting twists and stuff, I find them interesting. And I like learning about them and seeing how everything comes together. I just don't like jump scares. But I think the genre is probably one of the strongest in film. I'm thinking a book can't jump scare me. You know, it can creep me out, it can freak me out, but it cannot make me jump, right? Right? Am I about to learn the hard way that they can? But I have a selection of horror books here that I've purchased throughout the last few years because I wanted to read them. These are books that for whatever reason I thought I want to read that. And now I'm sitting here trying to make a video themed around horror and I'm like, oh, I actually have a few. So I'll show them to you. First we have Summer Suns by Mandelo. This was also nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards for horror in whatever year that was. I honestly don't know what this is about. I did at one point. I purchased this years ago though, so I don't remember. I think it's about a college-aged boy. Yeah, okay. So there's these two guys, best friends, one 6 months older than the other. So one splits off, goes off to college, and the one left behind, Andrew, not super happy about that. To be honest, based on the synopsis, it seems like he's a little bit obsessed with him. And then Eddie dies of apparent suicide, and Andrew doesn't believe it, and so he's trying to figure out what happened, and he's kind of living Eddie's life while he tries to figure it out. Whirling between the backstabbing academic world where Eddie spent his days and the circle of hot boys, fast cars, and hard drugs that ruled Eddie's nights, the walls Andrew has built against the world begin to crumble. And there is something awful lurking, waiting for those walls to fall. It says that when Eddie dies, he leaves Andrew a horrible inheritance, a roommate he doesn't know, friends he never asked for, and a gruesome phantom that hungers for him. I don't know if they legitimately mean there's a phantom, or if that's like metaphorical. This cover is very creepy. This is the longest one I'll be reading for this video, but I am intrigued by it. The heck? Okay, well I opened to literally page 1. Andrew is actually his adoptive brother. I'm so confused. I really want to read this though. I am excited about it. I've been wanting to read it like desperately for so long that I like put myself off reading it, which makes no sense. But we're gonna read it. The next one I have is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This one was also nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. You see, I've owned these books for so long. I knew what they were about at one point in my life. It says, acclaimed author of Gods of Jade and Shadow returns with a mesmerizing feminist reimagining of Gothic fantasy in which a young socialite discovers the haunting secrets of a beautiful old mansion in 1950s Mexico. We follow Naomi, whose newlywed cousin sends her a letter asking for help from like doom. Certain doom. What is the word it used? Mysterious doom. Okay, so she's claiming that her husband is poisoning her and that there are ghosts. So Naomi heads over to see what the hell's going on to this remote house out in the countryside. Apparently the house starts to invade her dreams with visions of blood and doom. And there's a dark past to the family, because of course there is. So I'm interested to find out if this is actually like, this house is fucked, there's something wrong with it, it's supernaturally influencing people, possessed house or something. I don't know if it's gonna go that route or it's gonna go the route of this family is messed up and is just screwing with people. Either way, I think it could be really interesting. It's set in the 50s, so that's interesting as well, and in Mexico. And then the last one I have here is actually one I know most people don't like, but I still think I will enjoy as someone who does not really read horror, and that is Hide by Kiersten. This is an author who has written a lot of YA paranormal stuff, and this is an adult horror. This is about this challenge where people have to stay in an abandoned amusement park for a week without getting caught. And if they win, they get a whole lot of money. Enough money to solve like all their problems. It says 14 competitors, 7 days, everywhere to hide but nowhere to run. Come out wherever you are. Which is kind of creepy. I do think I will enjoy this. I don't know if I'll love it. A lot of people don't like it. I know I've enjoyed Kiersten in the past, so I feel like I have a better chance at liking this. So these are the books I'm going to read for this video. I'm going to come back and tell you what I think of each one once I've read it, and we will discuss what, if anything, I learn about myself and my enjoyment of horror, if there is one. I hope I enjoy these. I hope that I discover this is a genre that I enjoy, because I don't know, I feel like sometimes it's important to try and expand what you read. Even if you read something, hate it, decide I don't want to read that genre again, that's fine. I just think that sometimes I get too comfortable and I need to broaden my horizons a little bit. I'm gonna read these books and I'm gonna tell you what I think of each of them, and it's gonna be a time. I will see you once I've read the first one. I feel like I need a necklace, but I didn't get one. So last night I finished Hide by Kiersten. This is the first book I read for this video. I ended up giving this a 2-star rating. It's not that great. It was enjoyable, it was fast. It took a while for me to get into it, and then, I don't know, it was so detached. It felt very detached from the characters, and the plot twists weren't that good. They were either predictable or just I didn't care about them, so that was a bit of a lackluster start to this project. I did find the setting and the premise quite interesting. These people have all been gathered up and they're in an abandoned amusement park and they're trying to last out the week. And it kind of gives Hunger Games vibes almost, in that they keep dying. I feel like that's supposed to be a twist that they're dying, but it's very obvious right from the start. And that was one thing that really did annoy me about this, was that I knew, the audience knew what was going on well before the characters did. And that is so frustrating. I don't think the story hinged on that being a surprise. At least I hope it didn't, because it wasn't. I do think the author relied very strongly on character stereotypes or character archetypes, which I understand for this book why it was done, because it's mimicking kind of like a reality TV show kind of situation, but that got old quick. Yeah, I really wasn't surprised by almost anything. It was strange while I was reading it. I kept thinking of other books that this was reminding me of that I liked better. The narrative voice in this, although I guess that's kind of broad, the storytelling of this is very sporadic. You flip from person to person a little bit and it's third person and you're not really connecting to them at all. But I would say we're supposed to be following Mac more than anybody else, and her way of viewing the world and narrative structure reminded me a lot of Lynette from the Final Girl Support Group. The way she closes herself off, the way that she thinks of everything as a threat and doesn't trust a single thing ever, never gets close to people, and almost has like an oversimplified, everything is black and white view of the world. That felt very similar here. Obviously I like this book, not a big fan of this book. So, I guess also because there is a similarity in trauma, Mac is the only one left alive from her family. They have a shared traumatic history and reason not to trust, I guess. Again, it had kind of Hunger Games vibes. The amusement park was basically an arena. They weren't really fighting each other, but kind of felt a little bit like that. It's pretty gruesome, kind of gross. Some of the descriptions, not overly so, and there aren't that many of them, but it was a little disturbing at times. I did enjoy it for what it's worth. It could have been a lot better. The ending was so lackluster. I feel like we were building and building and building to this epic ending, this final confrontation, and then it kind of just fizzled. And I just feel like we didn't solve anything. It just potentially made the problem way worse. It was disappointing, but I read it and I gave it 2 stars. It's probably more like a 2.5 because I did enjoy actually reading it. It was entertaining and kind of fun. So there's that going for it. I read the whole thing yesterday, so I mean it's not very long, but still. I believe this was Kiersten White's first adult novel, and I feel like she should have just written it as a young adult novel. I feel like if this was YA, it would have hit harder. It would have been more interesting. And there was a certain relationship in here that I thought was like very familial, a pseudo family kind of vibe, and then nope, we romantic now. And I was like, oh, not every book needs romance. And I'm saying that as someone who mostly only reads books with romance. This was not the time or place. If any of you have read it, let me know what you thought, but I'm ready to go on to something hopefully better. So these are the other 2 books that I have to choose from, Summer Suns and Mexican Gothic. And I think I'm gonna start with Mexican Gothic because we matched today. I feel like a change of pace is needed. So we're gonna jump back to the 50s and see what this creepy ass house has to say. This book. Okay, so I finished reading this book last night, Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and it made me uncomfortable. It made me so unsettled. It took a hot minute to get into this book, probably around 80 or so pages before I was like hooked and wanted to read more. And then I was reading it, and then I got so uncomfortable that I was like, there's no way I can just stop reading now and go to sleep because I'm not like, no, I'm not okay with what's happening. I ended up reading the whole thing last night, which was not my intent, but it happened. I ended up giving this a 3 stars. While I do think it did a good job of setting up the atmosphere and kind of drawing me into this world and this unsettling situation, I was very uneasy reading this book, and like props for that because that's impressive. But what the hell was that ending? I feel like we had such a slow build up for the first good portion of the book that it felt very rushed towards the end. It didn't match the rest of the pacing of this book. And I am just gonna say there's a romance in this book that I don't think needed to be there, and I don't think added to the story. I think it took away. I did like the writing. I did like our protagonist. I think Silvia Moreno-Garcia did a really good job with that. There was one particular thing that happened in here that was an aspect of the horror that kind of crossed a line for me personally, and I've only encountered it in one other piece of horror media in my life. It was in a movie, and I couldn't sleep for like 3 days after watching that movie just because I was so disturbed. At least in this, I wasn't watching it. It made me want to vomit. I'm not gonna say what it is because it's, I guess, kind of a spoiler, because I definitely wasn't expecting it to go anywhere near that route. While I know it's a horror and that's kind of the point and it should get bonus points for doing that, I'm actually kind of detracting because I feel like for me that's too far. And I know that's a personal thing, but this is a personal review and a personal rating. I rate my books not based on any critical or literary merit. I rate them based on how much I enjoyed reading them. That's it. I will read more Silvia Moreno-Garcia in the future, which is good because I own another Silvia Moreno-Garcia, so I'm glad I enjoyed this one. So I feel more motivated to read the next one. I did really like it. If you're wanting some really atmospheric creep vibes, this will do it for you. Oh, my camera battery's flashing. That's great. So again, I couldn't give it a higher rating than a 3. I just feel like there were some times where it kind of missed the mark or things didn't fully make sense. And the ending was really kind of dumb in my opinion. Like just the actual way the book ended, not the overall conclusion of the horror aspect. That was fine. It's just the book itself. Something I'm noticing about this, I don't have a lot to say about horror books because I think a lot of them hinge on you not knowing what you're getting yourself into, so I don't want to over explain it. But I did enjoy it, and I'm more and more excited about getting into Summer Suns by Mandelo and kind of rounding out this reading horror video that I'm doing. But I'm gonna read Summer Suns and tell you what I think about it at some point. Is it the most obvious thing in the world that I fell asleep on the couch and woke up maybe 15 minutes ago? So last night I finished Summer Suns by Mandelo, and I have thoughts. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I quite enjoyed reading it. I was pretty invested in the story, and I enjoy reading from the characters and everything. This is a story about a guy named Andrew whose best friend and adoptive brother Eddie has recently passed away, and he's kind of moved into Eddie's old home and is following in his footsteps of what he was doing, his graduate program. As it delves further and further into spooky ghost shit, to paraphrase the book itself, to try and figure out what actually happened. It was ruled a suicide. He doesn't believe it for a second, and he's trying to figure out what happened. Shit gets weird. There's like ghostly, phantom, zombie-esque type things. This is queer. Our main character is heavily grieving and very fucked up. There's a lot of drug use in this book, and alcoholism, and car racing, illegal street racing, and driving while under the influence of various different things. I don't necessarily think the relationships built in this book, or that created the foundation of this book, were healthy. They were not, but I don't think they were supposed to be. This book exists on vibes. The whole time I was reading this, it felt like I was reading a fantasy, not a horror. I really enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it as someone who reads a lot of like paranormal, urban type fantasy things, or even a little bit like magical realism type stuff, or surrealist fiction. It did not feel horrifying at any one point. Horrifying things happened to certain characters, but it didn't feel horror-inducing. I was not feeling horror. This is like a modern Gothic story, more than a horror story. I enjoyed it. I'm so glad that I read it. The dust jacket keeps trying to like fall off the book. But yeah, I liked it. So, mixed results this video. One thing I will say I noticed with this book and this book and this book was that when like the big climax thing happened, it felt rushed. I don't know if that's a thing with horror or these books or just me, but it felt like we've spent so much time building up to these big climactic points of conflict and tension and everything boiling to a head, and they just kind of happened really quickly, and then we're over, and then there's like an awkward afterwards bit, and then the book finishes. These two books definitely, like, we spent such a slow burn time working towards the climaxes for them to not really have the impact I think they should have had and deserved to have. Plot twist in this was not very twisty. I kind of saw everything coming. The big bad, I guessed the second they were introduced, and I guessed their motive the second the motive was introduced. In fact, that felt so obvious to me that I don't really think it was supposed to be a surprise, but it was a surprise to the characters. But I did enjoy it, and I am glad that I read it, and I am glad that I made this video. And with that, I'm gonna segue into my final thoughts, opinions, and feelings about the horror genre based on this experience. So I read 3 relatively different types of stories. This was like a monster horror, this was like a haunted house, and this was like a ghost story. All 3 are supernatural type horror. I do think that's where my interest mainly lies. That being said, I read the Final Girl support group before making this video. It is like a slasher, and it's all people. So maybe I should try reading more realistic horror. Not that that book's very realistic, but that's not my point. I enjoyed my time reading these. I gave Hide by Kiersten White 2 stars, Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia got 3 stars, and Summer Suns by Mandelo got 4 stars. So I did have a good time with these books, and I would definitely read horror again. I think I still need to figure out what my taste is, what my real interest in the horror genre is. But I definitely enjoyed aspects of all of these books. If you have any recommendations for me, please let me know, because clearly I don't know what I'm doing with this genre. I can see this becoming a part of my repertoire of books that I enjoy, if you will. I read a pretty varied mix. I think I mentioned this at the start of the video. It's been so long since I filmed that, but I read a lot of different genres, and being able to add horror into that I think is pretty good. I feel good about that. I read a lot of romance, and so delving into something with a very different vibe and atmosphere is like refreshing. I really enjoyed these books. I really enjoyed making this video and kind of talking through how I felt about these books and trying to pinpoint what I liked and didn't like about them and see if I can find those things, the ones I liked, in other horror. For now, this I would say was pretty successful and I enjoyed myself, and I have a piece of hair sticking out the side of my head. Has that been there this whole fucking time? But that's it for this video. I did the thing. I read the genre. I explored it a little bit, dipped my toes in to see how I feel, and I think the water's fine. I might jump in at one point. Who knows? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please leave a like if you did. It does help out the channel. And I hope you subscribe if you want to see more of my content. I post every week, and I will see you all next time, hopefully, in my next video. Bye!